Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Dubai Air Show, where our coverage is sponsored by FLIR Systems. And we are with my good friend, Dr. Rocket Ron Epstein from Bank of America Merrill Lynch. For all of you guys who watch our weekly Defense and Aerospace Business Report, you don't watch it, you listen to the Defense and Aerospace Business Report podcast. Ron is one of the two analysts who we use most frequently, and the other one is Sash Tusa of the independent equity research firm Agency Partners in London. And that particular product is sponsored by Bell Helicopter. And now we are at the Embraer Chalet at the end of a very long day, a very long second day of the Dubai Air Show. Ron, thanks very much for spending a little time with us.
Great to be here, Vago. Thanks.
And it's great to be doing this with video, which is the way we used to do it in the old days before we shifted to that new medium of podcasting. So first day under our belt, so many stories that are going on here, whether it's the Bombardier, Boeing, Embraer is pulled into that in part because of a little bit of the speculation. And you, Sash, and I, as well as others, Richard, when he's joined us, have talked about whether or not the Gulf carriers were going to be faltering. Where some of these big, long-distance carriers, including in Asia, were going to have some of the problems. Were those answered with Emirates' order of Boeing jets?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think one of the takeaways from this show is there's still growth in the region. It's less than, I think, what people were thinking before. It's not a region that's going to grow 15% a year, but could it grow mid-single digit? Sure. Right? Emirates seems, dead set on taking the airplanes they've ordered. A lot of it's for replacement, some of it's for growth. We had some conversations with Emirates today, and they're looking at their business model, and they're looking at costs and juggling things around. But I think one of the big takeaways is, they're dead serious. I mean, these airplanes, I think, will really get delivered.
Are there still other worrying signs, right? I mean, if you looked at we talked to Randy Tinseth of Boeing Commercial Airplanes. I asked him why haven't they adjusted upward? I mean, they're still at a 4.8% mean over their entire 20-year cycle. And he suggested that there could be room for increase, but he said, look, we're looking at long cycles, so we want to be conservative in how we play it, which would be an answer that Randy would give you. I know you've talked to him about it. Did you sense from anybody, whether from Airbus or whether from Boeing, any concern, or are they still bullish on growth patterns, even with some of the news we've seen coming out of some of the Asian and Middle Eastern carriers?
Yeah, I'd say they're still broadly bullish on growth. I mean, I think Randy's point of view is justified, right? I mean, there always is kind of a reversion to the mean, and we've been well above the mean for a while, so you would expect it to revert back up at some point. When, it's hard to say. When it does, I mean, I guess the real concern is not does it just revert to the mean, but to be the mean, it's got to go below the mean for a while. And when does that happen? And that's an open question. I mean, to be fully candid, I mean, I would have thought that would have happened a year or so ago. But global air traffic's been very strong, continues to be strong. So we'll see. I mean, it seems like we really are in a coordinated global growth environment. That's great for air traffic. But we won't always be, right? So right. So I think Randy's view is realistic. If not a little guarded, but it's I think he's probably dead on, right?
The Boeing team has been very bullish. There are a lot of folks who observe that the company has a spring in its step, and how Airbus sort of is a little bit off its stride and has been a little bit off its stride. Did you get that sense here as well from the Airbus team that you would say 18 months ago, 2 years ago, was looking like it was banging on all cylinders, and Boeing was the one that was looking like it was faltering a little bit, and now the tables for many people seem to be turned. They've eaten through all of that 787 backlog that was a big concern that folks had. How do you perceive that? I mean, did the Airbus guys seem to have a spring in their step when you met with them?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back and forth, right? I mean, orders ebb and flow in this industry, right? So, it's Boeing's day in the sun right now. The 40 787-10s that were ordered by Emirates was a surprise. They don't get delivered till 2020. So some people were scratching their heads and saying, well, why were they ordered now? And there's some time. But you had that, and you had the firming up of 20 737s today. So, this show on top of the Paris Air Show, Boeing's definitely had a very good order period. It's been light for Airbus, right? So, but I think you have to look at this industry from you have to step back and just kind of separate, the forest from the trees, and it goes back and forth. And, this has for sure been, Boeing's time.
The Boeing guys also were, I don't want to use the term derisive, but we're not as impressed with Bombardier's move with Airbus on the C series to start that second production line in Alabama. And Kevin McAllister told reporters, hey, all we want is a fair playing field, and we don't feel it's a fair playing field, and we're throwing the card on the field. Talk to us a little bit about whether or not you've gained any more insight, and have a sense. I know that you talked to Fred today, Fred Cromer at Bombardier. We talked to him as well. What's your sense on how this is going to play out, and whether or not this is going to be as successful a strategy? Talked to a Boeing friend, and he said, look, the setting up a second production line always has challenges, and a whole bunch of things go with it, and fundamentally, they don't think that there are going to be those numbers, the 6,000, for example, that Bombardier said. How do you think this is going to end up? Are there going to be antitrust pitfalls? Any refinement of some of the conversations that we've been having over the past couple of months on this issue?
Yeah, this is a topic we could talk about for a couple of hours, to be blunt, right? We recently published a report where we looked at kind of the activity in this market, and if you break out activity in the narrow-body market and you break it out by trips that are done by trips that are less than 3,200 nautical miles and aircraft that have, call it, between 110 and 160 seats, it turns out to be about 47% of all the flights that happen in the narrow-body market, at least in 2016. So it's a big segment of the market, meaning there's a lot of action that happens there. Historically, there hasn't been that many airplanes sold there, and you have to scratch your head and wonder why. And is it because of the marketing campaigns between Boeing and Airbus? Is there some other reason? And you could debate that all day long. But the reality is it's a segment where there could be a lot of activity. With Airbus behind the airplane, and if they really do support it, could they garner a lot more sales? They potentially could. Now, to the production line in Alabama, yeah, of course, setting up a second production line is going to be complicated. As you said, it always is, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. Presumably, they've worked out a lot of the bugs and everything up in Canada. And don't forget, Airbus is pretty experienced at setting up other production lines, right? They already have one of their own lines in Alabama. They have one in Tianjin, China, and then of course they have their line in Germany. So Airbus knows how to do this, right? Can they show the Bombardier guys how to do it? Yeah, of course they can, right? So there's some there's intellectual property there on how to do it, and they have it. So yeah, it's probably not going to be as hard as the Boeing guys think. But from the Boeing side, what are they going to say? Yeah, this is a great idea. It's going to be easy for them? No, I think their response is a natural, logical response to what's going on.
And any defense stories that you're paying attention to? Obviously, UAE has always been interested in F-35. The last administration was a little bit concerned about releasing the technology in this region, in part in order to protect Israel's qualitative military edge. Now, this administration, the Trump administration, looks like it's much more. First the Emiratis are more publicly asking, but also the Trump administration seems receptive to that. Is that one of the defense? How does that change the equation? If at all, from your standpoint? It's a newsy story. But from a financial aspect and a program health standpoint, does that, or does that suggest, hey, there's another really big potential market over here?
Yeah, I think there's a couple angles on that. One, there is another big potential market here, and as you know, more volume going down that line is better for everybody on that line, all the suppliers, the cost of the airplane, but also you have to kind of think big picture. There was an order for 40 787-10s, and there's talk about F-35s, and it's hard in this part of the world to separate all the politics. So, you kind of have to think maybe a lot of this stuff's tied together.
Really? Could it be, gambling? Really? For all you Casablanca fans out there. And one more question. We're at Embraer. One of the airplanes that has always impressed you, and it is genuinely an impressive airplane, has been the KC-390. Strangely, from a company that has done a terrific job with single-aisle planes. I think you were the first to note. I just want to remind everybody that's a 767 fuselage cross-section for anybody who's paying attention. Although folks at the company are always very steadfast in saying, hey, look, we have no intention of climbing up that ladder. Anything more than 150 seats isn't something we're interested in. But that airplane was having a very golden development cycle. And then there was a recent test that, was a stall test, but it took a little more to recover, and the aircraft could have been a little bit damaged in that process. And I know that you're an aeronautical engineer. You have a PhD in that. Talk to us a little bit about that. Is that a serious thing? Is that a big concern? What have you gathered in some of your conversations, given how closely you covered the company?
Yeah, any test is important. Stall tests can be tricky, right? Everything's fixable. You got to remember that the aircraft is still in its certification mode. So am I particularly worried about it? No. Do I think the platform's a home run? Yeah. There's nothing like it in the world, period, full stop. It's in many ways it's a better designed small C-17, right? And there's nothing that can compete against it anywhere. I think it's going to be a very good product for the company. I think it's going to be well received in the market. And I mean, I'll go as far to say, even in the U.S., I wouldn't be surprised if they sell a couple, because it can do some missions that turboprop just can't.
For example?
Speed, right? So if you want to do, in terms of special forces, special ops, that kind of thing, there's things you can do with it that you can't do with a C-130.
And what are the other last two things that you spotted here that you thought, or heard or saw, that you thought, man, that's interesting?
I would say probably the one of the things that jumped out at me was the focus of the airlines in the region on the low-fare carriers and changing their business models to focus more on sort of that incremental passenger in the back of the airplane. For years, everybody thought about the carriers in this region as just about what's going on in the front of the airplane, but you see an increasing focus on that. Had some interesting conversations with several airlines today, in the region, talking about, the digital world and how they can make their business models more digital. In fact, one of the things that I thought was just fascinating is we spoke to one of the Saudi carriers and how they're really, I'm just maybe a little ignorant on Saudi demographics, but there's a huge young population there, and that population in Saudi is very savvy with their smartphones and things, and how they're trying to focus to get that population. So it seems like the airlines in this region are making a transition from sort of these curious anomalies that had super first class and were growing unprofitably, to airlines that are more mature now and trying to focus on real business models that have a balance between the front of the airplane and the back of the airplane.
And that's exactly one of the reasons why supporters of Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, always point out that the demographic is a massive, very tech-savvy, a very sophisticated young population that wants change, and that's one of the reasons why he's driving it. So what else are you going to be, in the couple of seconds we've got left, what else are you going to be paying attention to over the course of this week?
Yeah, so kind of back to the C-Series, right? One of the things you might expect to happen, kind of after the announcement, are they gaining more traction? Just a week ago they announced an order, and there's some speculation that maybe they'll see another order here. If you see that, 2 orders in the span of maybe 2 weeks, then maybe that means they really are starting to get traction.
Oh, one last thing. So Boeing, Boeing made it clear that, or rather, I should say, Bombardier has made it clear that, hey, what they did on C-Series with Airbus was not a counter move to whatever Boeing had done, was part of the natural course of business. Kevin McAllister, head of Boeing Commercial Airplanes, was very coy with reporters when the question came up whether or not Bombardier had any conversations with Boeing in advance. What's Boeing's counter move to this? Because the Boeing guys were very confident that this move was not going to throw them off their game, that they were going to press ahead. We had discussed whether or not there's something that happens with Boeing and Embraer or whatever. What's your sense about what a Boeing counter move here could be, or is it just to press the case ahead?
Yeah, I think the Boeing guys tend to be pretty thoughtful about what they do. And I think, realistically, what you have to do now is just sit back and see a little bit. Does this really work? Does the Airbus sales force get behind the airplane? Does it actually have a meaningful impact in the market? Because if it doesn't, you don't have to do anything, and you just kind of forge ahead. When the first campaign happens, where Boeing loses it because they don't have a smaller airplane to offer, then probably Boeing will have a strategic move in its pocket that they want to do. Until then, there's probably no rush. If indeed the strategy is successful for Airbus, success being measured by them winning a big campaign because they have a broad product to offer, so they could sell some smaller airplanes and some mid-sized narrow bodies and some big narrow bodies. If indeed that campaign does happen where Boeing were to lose it because they don't have the small plane, then you would think Boeing has to do something. Now, does Boeing is it in their sights that they'll develop a small airplane? Probably not. There's in my view, and I don't think most Boeing people would argue with this, there's probably no way for them to do that, cost-effective enough where they can make money. So you would expect them to potentially partner with somebody. So, I wouldn't be surprised if that were to play out, that they were to partner on some level with the chalet we're standing in front of right now, with the Embraer guys. And that's not in some form of M&A, but some sort of sales partnership, or maybe they bring them in on some campaigns where they need to. But they have time to wait and see. They're in that seat right now. Because we'll see how it plays out, and there's no rush. It's an industry that changes slowly, and there's no point in making a rash move.
And Boeing, of course, partnered on the KC-390 program with Embraer. Ron, as usual, thanks very much. We appreciate it, and hope you have a great time here and a great trip home.
Yeah, thanks, Vago. My pleasure.